And I think that that's one of the things that I admire about entrepreneurs and people that are self-starters is that there's not any of them that's just like, oh, and it just clicked for me. And I just, all this stuff happened. No, you've had 17 other things that failed.
Hi, and welcome to the Flat Bill Investors Podcast. I'm Josh Siglowski.
I'm Zach Spencer. Today we have a person of action, and anybody who knows her will know that she is a person of action. She does a great event every year. We're going to talk about that a little later today. We are blessed to have Rachel Barker on the show today. Welcome, Rachel.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, we're happy to have you. So I know you and Josh go back a lot of years, 20 years. So you guys...
Even though we grew up in the same town.
We did.
In Morgan, Utah.
I didn't know you were from Morgan.
Yes.
You didn't know that?
Yeah. No, I did not know that.
Morgan.
So there you go.
Yep.
Really?
That makes a lot of sense, though, if you've known her for 20 years.
Well, no, that's not how I know her, though.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we met each other in Layton when we both lived in Layton. I was our family's home teacher.
Oh, there you go.
And then just by talking, she went to school with my cousins. Her dad was a football coach at Morgan. And so, and her dad is a legendary coach there. So, I don't know how much audience knows. But.
Yeah, you could look it up because I was going to say there's news articles and all sorts of. Wasn't there even a video that was done?
There was a movie, a biography that was done on him by NFL Films in the late 70s.
Yeah, so cool. So that's awesome. So anyway, Rachel, you're here. We're happy to have you.
I'm so excited.
We've already been chatting for a minute, but there's a lot to share. So welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah. So Rachel, what's been going on the last few years in your life?
I think that I've slowed down a little bit. I feel I became a grandma in the last 5 years. Actually longer than that. I have a 6-year-old granddaughter and a 4-year-old grandson. All of my kids are either in relationships or out of the house except for Noah.
Wow, there you go.
Noah is a 14-year-old teenager. And I've just decided that I don't know how good of a teen mom that I am. In managing teenagers. I'm just
I don't know if anybody who has
I'm
teenagers
definitely not.
I'm really great at this. All of us are in that boat where it's do we even know what we're doing here?
Yeah, I think even in the manuals, I'll look at the manuals and I've done everything wrong. It's a wild ride. And people ask me all the time because I have 3 girls and 2 boys, and they'll say, which is better? And I'd actually take my girls going through this than over my boys. They threw me for a loop.
There you go, teen boys.
Well, she's got awesome kids too. I mean, her 2 oldest kids babysat my kids
there you go.
Years ago.
That's awesome.
That's how.
That's good. A little history here so we know.
Yeah.
So we won't, should we get into a little dirt? Can you spill some?
Do I have any dirt? I don't know. I feel like we all we could do is share some neighborhood drama that we kind of laughed about. But other than that, we don't really have a lot of dirt.
No dirt. There you go. Well, we'll leave the dirt question alone.
Okay.
So, I guess then I'll ask you two then, because I obviously do have a lot of history, is as you've seen each other through the last, even you said you met 20 years ago, but even as of the last, 5 or 10 years, maybe you could each just share really quickly something that you've seen each other accomplish that you've been excited to see, or just seen each other's growth. What have you guys seen there?
Well, I'll start, not about myself, about Rachel. So, and we were talking about this a little bit before, is watching each other's growth really. And with Rachel's growth, it's been interesting because, when we're going to talk about Galentines later on in the show. But the one thing that we always try to add to value to our audience and our listeners is what type of value can we add, right? And the one thing we talked about is, talking about that person of action. Because there was something, you've always been a person that would always take action, but there was something that just clicked and just almost was like, you know what, I don't care what other people think. I'm just going to go do it. I'm going to have some haters at the very beginning. And that's to me, I always hated that, but it's the way it goes.
Not fun.
Well,
how'd you kind of get through that?
Oh, I was going to say, when you're doing something that other people just want to do, they wish there's going to be some met with some resistance or maybe even some resentment there. So it's interesting that you say that. I
think the pushback, in which you both could probably recognize, are people that you know. The pushback very rarely comes from strangers. They come from your family members. Mm-hmm. They come from people that have known you in a certain way for a while. I would just say that my biggest criticism was what is your hidden agenda? Why do you want to do these things? Which I think is a fair question. I think that going into a question is you're trying to understand why they're asking it, not necessarily taking it as a criticism. It's how you take it. But to say that it doesn't bug you is lying. That's lying. I think that I got over my haters really quickly by not focusing as much on them. I focused on what I was doing. And either they'd buy in and they'd come along or they wouldn't. Like it was pretty, I'm a black and white person. There's like, I don't really give a lot of ambiguity. Like, so like it's either this way or that. So when I started, I just I knew what the need was. If you always know what the end result is, then I think that you can keep going. And you think like, and most all of the people that I was trying to serve or build the community was for a certain purpose, for someone that was struggling. And I think that we can all agree, no matter where we are, no matter what room we're in, the only thing that we know is that every single person has struggled. I think that not one person, I don't think one person's in there and has had zero difficulty in their life. And if they are, it's coming.
Well, you mentioned something, and it reminds me of what you quote all the time, is you got to have the start with the end in mind. Yeah. Right.
Right.
And so like, I'm a big person on watching The Men That Built America, The Food That Built America, and all those, that built
You
series.
watch those like once a year, don't you? Like pretty
once a year,
religiously?
during the Christmas break. It motivates me for the next year, but you hear all these stories and they persevered. They pushed through. There was something that they lost everything. It's like, you look at Walt Disney. We think Walt Disney was just this, awesome dude that created Disney. And like, you see what he did before, you're like, man, you had so many excuses just to say, I'm just going to go do something else. It's because he had that, the end in mind of like, you know what, I am focused on this end result. And because of that, there's going to be some bumpy roads in the middle, right?
I also think that Walt Disney knew his role. So one of his biggest quotes, like, it's funny, the only reason why I know this is that my son had to do a report, winky face. I did the report on the, you're like,
he had to do the report.
We did read the book together. And one of the things that Walt Disney says is, listen, I don't know how to build the roller coasters. I'm the idea guy. I can tell you what I want it to look like, but I'm not going to be bolting the screws in there. He knew his role, and then he found the people that helped him get what he needed. Yeah, and so I think that that's with anything that we build, we don't ever do it alone. We need a team. And I think that I had to learn that really, really early on in this, is that I needed a team and like-minded team.
It's funny because there's a book called Rocket Fuel, and it talks about being a visionary or an integrator, and he's a guy that's consulted Fortune 500 companies. And he says the 90% of them that are successful has a visionary and integrator. In the Disney case, Walt was the visionary and Roy Disney was the integrator. And
Roy was really the star. If you read the book of Walt Disney,
all the employees knew Roy. They didn't know Walt.
Yeah, it's so because he managed. He was the one that did all the stuff that was hard. Like he was the one that like did the financing, and when they didn't have financing, and so I think that like in watching, one of the things I think that both of us, as I've watched you and kind of coming back, is that I think that there's so many people that talk about grit, and it's so overused, and that term is so overused, but it's an undertone of a hustler in like that and both of us have had to hustle in our lives. Like I think that I've served more tables, and no matter where we lived, I didn't ever want to leave my kids like with a babysitter. So I would pick up a bartending or a cocktail waitress job or a server. And in fact, I ate at Liguori's yesterday, so I just wanted to let you know.
Did you used to work at Liguori's?
No, he just.
Or you just? I did. Oh, you did.
Josh did.
That's so great.
And so like we've all had to learn to work, and our jobs weren't glamorous, but we knew like what we needed to do together. And I've watched you do that. I've watched you go from different companies, and I've watched you like be on the struggle here, but you just kind of knew where you were going. And I think that that's one of the things that I admire about entrepreneurs and people that are self-starters, is that there's not any of them that's just like, oh, and it just clicked for me. And I just, all this stuff happened. No. You've had 17 other things that failed.
Yeah. What are they, the quote about being, it only took me 6 years to become an overnight success.
Yeah.
So they don't, or 10 years or 12 years.
6 is a happy story.
That might be
That's
a happy
funny.
story. That people say, oh yeah, it's like, oh, you just are here, you've made it. And like, well, you didn't see the 12 years or however long it took me to start and fail or start and try. And, and so, it's a funny thing.
Well, it's funny because her husband's one of my best friends, and I went on a lot of hikes with him. I mean, I'd say over 200 to 300 hikes.
Oh, really?
They've been
maybe long, maybe
and
more.
They call themselves hikes, but they're like a sprint down, jog up. I would never go.
We're too old now to do that, but I haven't seen him for a bit. But I still remember like all the different opportunities I'd always talk to him about. Like, oh, I'm starting this one thing, and I'm like, nope. 6 months later, I'm starting something else. It's just when you talk about this overnight success, it's going to take many, many years.
Yeah.
But also it's kind of like in sports. I always say you win or you learn. Yeah. And every time I got to a point, I always worked lean, like meaning like very like my time. I was putting my time in, but very little money, right? But I'd always get to a point like, is this going to turn the corner or not? And then I'd know like it's not going to turn the corner. I got to go put something else, put some effort in something else, right? And I think as an entrepreneur, you got to know that's how it's going to work.
I got some great advice. So I just obviously we've got our store up in Boise. So I flew up to Boise last week. And sat down on the plane. I was sitting next to a pretty notable face from Utah. His face is on lots and lots of billboards all over the place, so you'd see him. And anyway, so at the end of the flight, I just said, "Hey, I'm obviously a little bit younger than you. I feel like I'm just starting on a new preneur as far as entrepreneurs go, and I would regret it if I didn't ask you a question." I said, "What is a little bit of advice? One or two things you would tell me as just." Where you're at in life, he told me 62. Anyway, just really quickly, he said, as an entrepreneur, just keep going. He said, that's my first piece of advice. Push through, just keep going. And then he said, always make sure you treat people well because you never know where that's going to lead. And I feel like as we've been talking today, Rachel, like you've got those things already locked down, as we get into a little bit of where you're coming from. And one of the reasons that I think I especially, look up to you as far as what you're doing is that you treat people well. And we just talked about that the reason you're doing what you're doing
not just
is
well,
not
she's
just
very
for
loyal
you.
as well.
Yeah.
Very loyal person.
Yeah. So anyway, even just getting those little tidbits of advice from him, I look and listen to what you've already been saying. And I go, yeah, man, you're already doing that. But where did that come from for you?
It was from my dad. I can never talk about him and not get emotional, but
do it. It's okay.
Just watching him, he had multiple sclerosis, and watching that, bits and bits and bits of him taken from him every day. And he just kept going. Till his death, it just wasn't going to beat him. And we were both raised in a small town. And I think one thing that we can both attest to is our coaches and our teachers and the people around us, there was a huge drive. When you say that there was an urge to drive, to be your best, whether it be scholastically, whether it be athletically, but there's no way that you can be on a team, whether it be basketball, football, volleyball, where you are not striving beyond yourself, where you are literally logistically helping a team get to where they're going. And so I think that drive to be the very, very best that you can be was given to me, I think, by my dad, but I had a coach. Her name is Liz Wiscombe. She's amazing.
In what
and
sport?
she was volleyball.
Okay,
And she's
Her
one of
husband's my basketball coach.
the winningest Utah volleyball coach that there is.
Wow.
She probably still coaches.
Yeah,
actually.
she still does. You wanted to work hard for her, not because she led by fear. It wasn't I want it, she's going to make us run more. You wanted her. You wanted to perform because there was a sense of pride to be on that team. And she would never ask anything of you that she wouldn't do herself.
Yeah, totally. And I say that all the time. I'm not going to ask you to do things I'm not going to do as well.
Yeah.
But she led by example,
Right.
And we keep on saying her dad. Her dad's Jan Smith, in case anyone wants to look it up. He never coached me. So he was not a coach by the time I got to high school, but I always knew about him, and always heard about him. And it just happened to be when I was in their living room and talking about Morgan, she mentioned that.
He coached up in Morgan, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. From a wheelchair.
Yeah, so that's one of the cool stories. And see, and I don't know very much about him. So Josh, kind of the other day when we were talking on the phone, Josh kind of started telling these stories. You could tell his level of excitement talking about your dad. That there's just a deep respect and a lot there. So that's pretty
and
cool.
It makes me happy because my biggest fear is people that are going to forget. They're going to forget his story. But I think that in what we're all trying to say is that why we do what we do has very little to do with the money that we're making or and it's more about who we are as people. Yeah. I think that what you do is very indicative of who you are.
Totally. Well, let's transition a little bit. Let's talk about Galentines. But before we go to Galentines, I was actually kind of curious why you changed your Instagram to DearRa.
So
before we go into Galentines.
That is an interesting. So
That's a great question.
I had early on, people had always told me, you remind me of Ann Landers, which is this person that used to give advice, or Dear Abby. And I'm like, that is so fun. That would be really, really fun.
Nobody who doesn't have a newspaper. If this is going to be a generation gap.
Yes, for sure. You're not going to know what I'm talking about. But they would write into the newspaper. They'd write in their issue. And it was really brief. They'd write in a situation, then somebody would respond. Well, in about 5 years ago, I wasn't even on Instagram. I didn't even know this algorithm. I had no idea. But I just thought that would be really fun. And so I just changed my name to DearRa, and people sent me letters. And these letters were brutally sad.
Oh,
They were
geez.
just, it was so hard to answer. And like some of them would be a little quirky, but most of them were so sad. And
they were just looking for advice.
They were looking for advice.
You
And
just gave
one that stood out like the most was this kid that he had lost a brother due to suicide. And they would sign this, the invisible child is what he signed his name to. And he said that he had lost his brother, and that since his brother's death, he was literally invisible to his family. Like he could do terrible things and the parents would not really react. And then he'd do amazing things and the parents would
just because their focus
they were
was
so in grief. The parents were so caught up in grief. Then it hit me like, cause I'd answered a few and I'd like done it and it was really, really popular and a lot of people loved it. And I got to this one, I'm like, whoa. First, you're not a therapist. You need to consult somebody before you like respond to this kid. And so I saw a friend who this had happened in her life. And it was just, it really quickly put me at like a disadvantage of saying like, what you say to people, they're going to take as gospel, you know?
Sure.
And it really I put on the responsibility backpack and I kind of tread water after that. Like, and I wanted to make it a little bit more light. And then we went right into COVID, like about a year later.
So this
and
is pretty recent.
It's in the last 6 years.
4 or 5 years.
Yeah. So, and people were really, really struggling. And I brought it back here and there. I'll do it like a question box. And then it's so much more lighthearted, like on purpose.
Yeah.
But there are some heavy ones. And I don't know if you guys ever watch like TikTok or whatever, but one of the things that I love is, remember Blue's Clues Steve?
Yeah.
He will just say, just like he did, how you doing? And then he'll like pause for a while. And the comments, you guys, there's no way you could read those comments and not just sob. And so I love the idea of it. I bring it back occasionally just on my stories. I don't really do posts on it, and they don't do IGTV anymore because they're longer anyway. But the things that people relay in anonymity, you would never believe. And so that's why I changed my
which
thing to DearRa.
sometimes you don't really give too much weight to what someone's Instagram handle is. It's maybe, that was what was available or something, but that's awesome to hear the story of the background of that. That's amazing.
So now you talked about COVID and it kind of transitions into Galentines. So Galentines, you've now done it since 2020?
Yes.
So how'd that get started? Was it before the pandemic? Because everyone knows
it was right
March,
in the middle.
April?
So the event is Galentines. I'll just give you a little premise.
I was going to say, for anybody who doesn't know what that is,
so
what is Galentines?
Galentines was started by like the show Parks and Rec, and one of their characters on the show is Leslie Knope. And she at the time didn't have a significant other, and so she wanted to build like a friend day that are really the people that have had her back. And so she started Galentine's Day, and real Galentine's Day is February 13th. And so we tried to build our event as close to Galentine's as we can. We were right in the middle of COVID. Like Utah really didn't lock down like back east and California. Like I think we did the thing, and then we're just like, okay, we went stir crazy. And so I was at that same juncture, and I'm like, we need to get these people out. They need to have a night of fun, and they need to do something. And so I had a friend that owned this venue in Midway. And I'm like, would you ever want to team up with me and do this? And we just have them. The only thing we charge them for is their food. And then we would just have this event. And she's like, for sure. And I said, well, let's do a service aspect to it. And we decided to auction off a cake. That was for this little girl. Her name was Savannah. And it just led to be this formal event that we have a dress code that's like red, white, and pink.
Pink, right?
And we all just like came, and we had a DJ, and they danced and had the best time. And we got a lot of flack for it though. I don't know if I told you guys that, but we got a lot of people that were like, we were super spreaders, and that people, we got really, really a lot of flack, and people that were like, we had a lot of influencers that came that didn't dare post their pictures because of that. But that was the first year that we did it. And that's kind of how it came. I wish it came to be not in such, but really the intent initially was to go have fun, give women an opportunity to be able to like let their hair down and just have a good time. And that's what we did.
I tried to get in last year and the year before.
It's women only?
Women only.
Yeah. The only two that are there are my photographer and his husband. And that's all that
the
comes.
only two men. Well, last year I was saying, last year Amber posted and there was a guy, and I said, hey, I thought it was
you have
women only.
Unless we do a podcast from there.
You're like, hey, listen, I saw a guy there.
I said that. I said, hey, who's the guy? She said, no, it's just the photographer, but not just. But anyway, that's awesome.
Yes.
I will say that it has given Amber an opportunity to serve, and also get dressed up. She looks forward, like you should see like weeks in advance. She's like looking for dresses and trying on dresses and making sure that everything looks right and feels right. So it's given her an opportunity to go give, but also play.
Yes.
And yeah.
So
and that's what
in
it
2020,
is.
in 2020, you started it. Now you've done it this last year. Like, do you keep it to a certain amount of people?
So the reason why we have to keep it under, so I think our max capacity is, it has to be under 200 due to the regulations of this building. And so I team up with the Wild Oak, and we have had an opportunity to grow it and grow it and grow it. And we should look at those options, because I hate turning anyone away.
I know.
That's something that I'm a big inclusions person. And I don't like that, not having everybody that wants to go. Because a lot of times we had people like saying, oh, do we have to have a certain number or status? I'm like, no.
Yeah.
First come, first serve.
When will you,
go ahead.
I was going to say, when will you start selling tickets?
So we usually start January 1st. That was when we started to sell them. And they usually last about 48 hours.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
it's quick.
And
That's
then-
awesome.
And the one thing that I want to make a point too is you don't, there's no money that's going to your pocket.
Well, that was a question I was just going to ask.
Yeah.
I was going to say, okay, so you've done it 2020, and then this will be the 4th year then.
So this coming year will be our 5th.
Our 5th year. Okay.
Yep, it'll be
in
2025.
Okay, so tell us just briefly about some of the people you've helped, or I don't know what you can kind of share there, but it seems like every year you sponsor only one person. It's not
so
like
we take submissions.
Yeah, go ahead.
So the submissions start in December, and we take all of the stories. I open up the submissions, and basically it's like they can nominate somebody else.
Okay.
There's only been a couple people that have nominated themselves. It's usually on behalf of another person.
Sure.
And then we read the submissions. We select that person before we even start the sell of the tickets. We select who that person, and then all of our marketing is based around that person. And then the tickets usually go on sale on January 1st, and then we go from there. So how it works is let's say our ticket price is $100. I take the cost of the food out of that, and then the rest of that goes to the recipient. And then we ask if anybody wants to donate. If we get a lot of private donations, we get and all of that goes to the person. And then separately, we do sponsors to actually throw the party. So this is really an event that goes on a $0 budget.
Yeah.
I'm so grateful for the people that collaborate with me, from the vendor to the photographer to the videographer. We have an amazing DJ. Everybody collaborates for this one person. We have the same person in mind. Everybody is doing this for this one person. And it's amazing the people that just come out of the woodwork that want to help this, knowing that they're getting nothing out of it.
You've done some real good. Like, you've raised a lot of money and done a lot of good for these people. So it's really amazing that you just took an idea and now you've grown it over a couple of years to where you've got sponsors and vendors and volunteers, and you've got the space, and you've done all the things that it takes to put this thing on. I mean, that's quite an accomplishment.
It's actually a point though, is if someone wants to sponsor, or how do they find you? Do they go to your Instagram page?
Just go to, you can message me on my Instagram page at dear.rach. And it's always been a goal of mine. And I'm putting it out there.
How do you spell Rach?
RACH.
Okay. Just in case someone's listening,
Dear
they're like, Dear Rach. Okay.
Yes. And I have a lollipop
and
in
we'll
front
have
of my face.
her link in our
Yeah, we'll link it.
But my biggest goal is to, as your wife knows, his wife always helps me. Her name's Amber, and I have a great, great volunteer staff. They're amazing, every one of them. That's probably our biggest thing, is we get I have these, they go in steps. I sell the tickets out, then I move on to the sponsors. And the sponsors is the biggest undertaking, because you can't have a party without the sponsors. And so my biggest goal is, I always said, it would just be amazing if this wasn't so hard to get sponsors. If we could just have people see the vision of who they've helped and what this has done, and knowing without a shadow of a doubt that every penny goes on to throw this party and to help this family. And so my biggest vision is it would be amazing if a huge corporation just said, we got you.
Yeah.
And we could literally breathe, because we are under the wire. She could probably attest. We are under the wire from January. It's way before that, where we're starting this, the marketing. My daughter does the marketing. My other daughters do the tickets and man the door. Even the family, even my husband is just he hates Galentines year.
Because it's
so much. Because he literally, it takes his wife out of the game for a minute, and he just watches the stress and the tears and all the things that happen. And so it's just putting that out there as the sponsors, just knowing what you're doing.
Do you still do it at that same venue? The one in Midway? Is it Midway, you said?
This one actually is in Linden. So the very first year was in Midway, and the last 3 years has been in Linden at the Wild Oak.
What I'm hoping is that somebody who's listening, and if you're listening, pay attention, but that somebody who has an idea of, I want to give, or I want to create something like this, some sort of a franchise of, hey, we're going to do this every year, or, raise money for people in need, that this can help inspire them. I think you are so inspirational. And I think we're lucky to be around you and to have you on the show today. And
thank you.
It's been
so much.
Very proud of you.
Yeah. Getting
Rachel.
the wheels turning, and just a big amount of love for people who are out doing what you're doing. I really appreciate it.
Also, if you know anybody, I'm looking at you.
Yes.
If you know anybody that is struggling, and we don't usually start our submissions until December, but keep that in mind, watch my stories. And then when we open that up, nominate someone that you know that needs help, and they get all of the profits.
There you go. I love it. Well, this feeds into our theme, and again, starting with the end in mind of why we started this podcast in the first place, which is to give back to people, to add value, not only emotionally, maybe financially, spiritually, however we can help people out. And you've been a big inspiration for us. So we appreciate you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I have loved this.
So thank you so much. Appreciate you being here and tuning in. Invest in your future.
Invest in yourself. This is the Flat Bill Investors Podcast, signing off.